Phil McCary with Laurelhurst Chiropractic, and we're doing something exciting today. I'm having a little interview here with personal injury attorney extraordinaire, Wade Bowyer. Um, we've known Wade for a long time, my wife and I. So, one of the first attorneys that I kind of developed a professional relationship with here in Portland um, through the owner of the firm, Paul Kruger. And we've over the years sent a lot of people to Wade who are in auto accidents, and he's always just done an amazing job. Worked really hard to help make sure that they were treated fairly. And so um, we wanted to take a minute and have Wade explain a few things about just the law in Oregon relating to auto accidents. There's a lot of confusion. People don't understand things, and we couldn't think of a better person to help answer some of those questions than Mr. Boyer here. Morning, Wade.
Good morning, and I'll start off by saying that a little disclaimer that nothing that I'm conveying in this video with Dr. McCrary should be interpreted as legal advice. If you need legal advice, give a lawyer a call. Give either myself a call or another lawyer that handles these kinds of situations. But I'm hopeful that through some questions and answers with Dr. McCrary here today, that we can help you out and help you point you in the right direction if you do get into an auto accident, auto collision, and you need some help. So,
yeah, great. So one of the first things that I want to ask is, what are some of the things people misunderstand about talking to an attorney or an auto accident attorney in general?
So I think, well, first off, one of the big misconceptions about personal injury lawyers like myself is somehow we're ambulance chasers. I think that goes back a long time. That somehow we're just trying to make a buck off somebody else's injuries, and that's just not the case. There's no doubt, personal injury lawyers, just like all lawyers, we make a living. That's what we're here doing. But especially in my case, I really enjoy helping people. And one of the main reasons I took on this career is that I myself was injured in an accident, collision when I was very young. I was struck as a pedestrian when I was a minor and suffered some pretty significant injuries. And the claim took a long time to resolve. And through that resolution process, I became a teenager, fairly impressionable teenager, and thought, wow, this whole system's kind of screwed up. This isn't really fair. And at the end of the day, I didn't get a very good outcome. And part of the reason for that is that we didn't hire a very good lawyer to help us out. And so from then on, I always kind of knew that I wanted to do this as a career, and eventually went on to law school and looked for a job in this field and got a job with a very good personal injury firm with my mentor, Mr. Paul Kruger. So I think one of the biggest misunderstandings that individuals have coming into this relationship is that somehow, the lawyer is going to end up in a better position than the client is, or that the injured party, our potential client, is going to do better on their own than they would if they get a personal injury lawyer, and that somehow they can handle it on their own. And that's just not the case. You're likely to get into one or two motor vehicle collisions in your entire life. The likelihood of that being an injury collision is less than one for your entire life. The major auto insurance carriers, they're handling thousands of these cases every single day. So as an injured party, as a personal injury victim, you're a one-shot player to a situation that the insurance companies are handling on a daily basis. And they've got lawyers, they've got trained, seasoned adjusters, those adjusters that, if you're watching this video, you've likely already talked to. They're trained to do their best to save the company money. That's their job. Their job is to save the insurance company money. And without getting an attorney in your corner, your ability to maximize your recovery, to make sure that your medical bills are paid, to make sure that you're compensated for any time off from work, to make sure that you get a fair settlement for the pain and suffering and the, essentially the loss of the life that you were enjoying before the accident. You have to get a lawyer, because there's just no way that the insurance company is going to treat you fairly without doing it. They have a number that they're going to stick to. They're going to make you a small offer, and they're really not going to give you more than that without getting a lawyer involved. And the reason for that is that we have the recourse to push them, to threaten. I don't like to use the word threaten, but essentially we can file a lawsuit on your behalf. Most individuals on their own aren't going to be able to go and do that, and that avenue allows us to maximize the value of your claim, to make sure that you're fairly compensated, at the end of your treatment, at the end of your recovery.
Yeah, and more, I recommend, if anyone's been in a collision, that they get an attorney. If there's any kind of significant injury or damage, I've seen too many of the games that some adjusters will play and some of the insurance companies will play, and just having someone that knows the law, knows what someone's entitled to, that actually is on someone's side. And because a lot of times people think that their adjusters on their side, because a lot of times they're very nice. It's not always the case.
No, and I always tell people, even your own insurance company is not really on your side. They're there to save the company money. That's what they are trained to do. And even though they are not necessarily lawyers, they understand the law most of the time, and they are going to use every avenue of the law to benefit the company, not you as the injured party. It's their job to save the company money, not to make sure that you're fairly compensated. And you use the word entitled. I don't like using that word.
Yeah.
I don't feel like anybody who's necessarily injured, and I think there's a misconception with that a little bit. I don't necessarily think people are entitled, but you have the rights under the law to be compensated for your injuries, to have your medical bills paid, to be compensated for your pain and suffering, and to be compensated for any other economic damages, lost wages. If you had a vacation plan and you had to cancel it and there were costs involved in that, you are allowed to be compensated for that. So you're not, and then I think, that goes back to people's misunderstandings, not about lawyers, but car accidents and motor vehicle collisions. This is not a windfall. It's not meant to be a windfall. You get a lawyer because you want to be compensated fairly and to be put back into the position you were, as best as possible before the accident happened. And what I always tell my new clients is that, unfortunately, there is no amount of money out there that is going to make the accident not happen. That just doesn't happen. You were involved in this incident. It's unfortunate that it happened. My job as an attorney, if I'm retained, is to do my best to make sure that you are as fairly compensated for the losses that you actually had as possible, to put you back in as good a position, or as close to as good of a position as you were the day before the collision occurred.
Yeah. So do you think everyone needs an attorney if they've been in an accident, in a collision?
So this is the way I feel about that. I think that if you're in a motor vehicle collision and you are not hurt, and they make you a fair offer on your property damage, probably don't need a lawyer. If you're not at fault and somebody else hits you and you're driving a brand new car, you may need to get a lawyer involved for what's called diminished value. We do some of that. That way you make sure that you get compensated fully for the loss of the value of the vehicle. Because if you're driving a brand new car and it gets smashed up pretty good, it's going to lose value too. So you might need a lawyer for that. But if you're driving like an old beater and you get hit and everybody gets out, everybody's fine, you exchange information, in that case situation, you probably don't need to get a lawyer. If you get in a motor vehicle collision and you are hurt and you have injuries, I almost universally think you need to talk to a personal injury lawyer, whether that's me or somebody else. No matter how significant your injuries are, even if they are fairly minor, I've seen it too many times where people just don't get treated fairly, I think you should at least reach out and talk to a good personal injury lawyer. And lawyers, especially if they're good at this field of the law, they'll be able to help you out, even if it's a fairly minor incident. They'll make sure your bills get paid. They'll make sure you get a little something in your pocket for the inconvenience of the whole situation. Especially, all that you were doing as the injured party was going about your day when somebody else did something, not intentionally, but because they weren't paying attention or they were on their phone, that caused this motor vehicle collision. So you're allowed to be compensated for that inconvenience that you suffered as a result of the collision. So I think the short answer is if you're hurt in the accident, call a lawyer. You're not going to be treated fairly if you don't.
Right. One of the things that a lot of people worry about is that it's going to be really expensive, especially if they've maybe been through a divorce or something like that. They're worried that they're going to have to come out of pocket, or it's going to be a big hassle to talk to an attorney. So is that something you can address?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Especially our firm, and I think most personal injury firms are this way. It costs you nothing to give me a call. I'm gonna listen to what's going on. I'm going to discuss the situation with you. And before the COVID-19 crisis, usually at that point we'd schedule you to come into the office and meet with me in person. Right now we're doing it all over a telephone conference. But that whole process, that costs nothing. We don't charge anything. We only are compensated if we are able to generate a settlement on your behalf. So if you retain us and for some reason it doesn't work out and we weren't able to collect any money, you wouldn't owe us anything for our time and effort. So, and most personal injury lawyers do that. Some lawyers will ask you for something up front, like a retainer or an upfront cost. Paul Kruger Law Firm, we don't do that here. We take every case with no money up front, and we rely on our abilities to make sure that we're going to generate a good outcome at the end of the case to compensate us for our time and effort.
Great. And to my understanding, that Oregon has pretty favorable laws for like the person who's injured in an accident. Is that something that you can address a little bit without obviously giving any specific legal advice?
Yeah, so Oregon, Oregon does have some favorable laws. There is mandatory personal injury protection benefits in the state of Oregon. So if you are driving a non-commercial vehicle, like your household vehicle, that vehicle, and it's insured, which means you have insurance on it, you have protection for $15,000 of essentially the best medical insurance coverage you could possibly get. It's better than your health insurance. There's no deductibles, there's no copays. You can go to any doctor that you choose and go get medical care for the injuries you had in the accident. So I think that's one of the biggest benefits to Oregon law, is that we have that mandatory personal injury protection coverage on all auto policies, non-commercial auto policies anyway. So that's favorable. We also have some laws that are favorable in the third party or negligent driver aspect that allow on small cases for cases to get resolved more easily and more quickly, especially if your case is not real large. If you just had minor injuries, there's some ways that we can go about generating a recovery that doesn't involve having to go to court, that doesn't involve a long drawn out process. So there's some benefits to Oregon law. There's been some setbacks in the legislature in the last few years that have limited some of the abilities to recover, but that's a much longer story. For the most part, yeah,
Sure.
Oregon's pretty favorable, at least in the way the laws are written, to help out those who are injured in motor vehicle collisions.
Good. Yeah, I think that's good for people to know. I have two questions I might sort of combine into one, but what should someone do if they're in a car accident, and what would you do if you were in a car accident? So maybe that's kind of the same thing. But
Yeah. So, and this is actually a tougher question than it sounds like, because it depends a little bit. So if you're seriously injured, it would be very hard to do some of the things that I always like people to do when they're involved in a motor vehicle collision. So if it's a very serious accident and you suffered significant injuries, the first thing you want to do is call 911. Call emergency personnel, get the emergency first responders there to check you out, make sure you're all right. If you're not all right, get transported to the hospital. So that's my disclaimer on that.
Yeah.
I think that's probably, that's not the majority of motor vehicle accidents where people are injured. I think in the majority of collisions, people are shaken up right after the accident, but they're able to get out of the vehicle, even though they may be suffering some injury and they may be sore or their neck hurts. I've even had people with bruises on themselves. You can usually get out. You still maybe call 911. I like it that you do that. Oftentimes, unless there are serious injuries, Portland Police or the Multnomah County Sheriff may not respond. They've got limited resources, and the first question they usually ask if you call 911 is, is anybody really hurt or really badly hurt? If you answer no, they're probably not going to come. So in those situations, what I would do and what I always advise everyone else to do is you need to put yourself in the position of being the responding police officer. So I think most people one time or another may have been pulled over in their life and generally know the process that when a police officer walks up, they want your license, your insurance card, and your registration. So what I always advise people is to ask the other party for those three things. You want to take a look at their driver's license, and most people now have camera phones, so take your camera phone, take a picture of their driver's license. They will have an insurance card. Hopefully they're insured. Take a picture of their insurance card. That way you have all of their insurance information. Thirdly, and the one that I think most people forget and they don't necessarily think they need, is the registration on the vehicle. That's important because oftentimes the driver of the vehicle is not necessarily the registered owner of the vehicle. And that's important for your lawyer to be able to ensure that we can track down the proper insurance coverage and make sure we know where all of the insurance is coming from. So always ask for the registration on the vehicle, take a photograph of that. And then I also suggest making sure you take a photograph of the license plate on the vehicle. That way, if we have to track the vehicle down, it makes it a lot easier for us. And then lastly, take a picture of the damage to the vehicle. As long as you can do all of that safely, if you're in the middle of the interstate, maybe you have to pull the vehicles over to the side. You want to make sure you do that as safely as possible. But make sure you photograph license, insurance card, registration, and then take photographs of the property damage on the vehicles as best as possible to your ability, depending on how injured you are at the collision scene.
Yeah, great. Do you recommend people just like blanket, just push record on their video or audio right away? Is that legal or good or anything like that?
It's I don't think there's anything illegal about that, and I think some people do that, and it can be helpful. I've run into it where it's not real helpful. A lot of times people are agitated. You're not necessarily yourself. You don't want to record yourself, swearing at the other person and those kinds of things. You can take some video. If the other person is, confronting you, that's a possibility. But, for the most part, photographs usually are good. We like having photos of the damage and the collision scene. A lot of times that's helpful for us. I will, on a side note, say that more and more vehicles are coming with built-in video monitoring capabilities. I know that one of my vehicles has that on it, and that's great. I like that. And a lot of times that helps to end any issues about liability if you have video of the accident itself actually happening. So it's supremely helpful to the attorney if the car does already have, dash cam video in it or has a rear view camera that's recording all the time. That's a little less common though.
Great. Any other little details about car accidents or anything like that I left out? I've got a couple more questions, but I want to see if there's anything that maybe you want to touch on that I didn't bring up.
No, I think, those are the basics. You just want to make sure that, you do everything to protect yourself. If you get in an accident, you want to make sure that you're safe. I think that's probably the biggest one. Do those things that I suggested to make sure you're doing them in a manner that, protect yourself and make sure that you and the other party are both safe at the collision scene. You don't want anybody else getting more hurt. You don't want to be in an accident and then get out and have another accident happen and have somebody as a pedestrian get injured. You don't want to be in those situations. So make sure that you secure the area, that you're in a spot where you're safe before you get out of the vehicle, exchanging information.
Okay. And then if you had, let's say, a brother, a cousin, a sister, something like that lived out of state, somewhere that you weren't licensed, and they were in a car accident, and they said, wait, I need to find an attorney, how would you advise them find the best person to help them with their case? And that's kind of a way of just saying, what should someone look for in an attorney? What would you look for in an attorney?
So first off, depending on where that is, if it's on the West Coast, usually they could even call me. And for the most part, I've handled cases I've handled some cases in Idaho, and we've gone to California. And actually, when I was a brand new lawyer, Mr. Kruger and I helped him in federal district court out in the Midwest. So we do travel some. We handle cases all over. In fact, I think we have a case in medical malpractice case, which is not motor vehicle incident, somewhere on the East Coast right now. So we do travel. A lot of times we can get state, at least for one case. It's not overly difficult to do. But on a run-of-the-mill motor vehicle case, if you're just looking for an attorney in your area and you need help finding one, and you're just looking and you get a referral from a friend and you want to know if they're a good lawyer, I think one of the best questions to ask an attorney when you're meeting with them, when was the last time you went to a jury trial? And people think that might be a weird question. I find it to be really important because the insurance companies generally keep track of which lawyers just will blanket settle every case that they get. They'll pressure their client to take whatever offer there is versus lawyers who are willing to litigate cases. Now, a lot of people may get scared, I don't necessarily want to litigate a case, but it's important for you as an injured party getting counsel that the lawyer you're retaining knows the entire process, not only knows how to handle the case at the beginning and make sure you get your benefits up front that the law requires, personal injury protection benefits, getting the vehicle fixed, getting a diminished value claim going. But you also want to make sure that if the case is not going to get resolved for a reasonable amount, or that there's a liability dispute and they're blaming you for the collision even though it wasn't your fault, that lawyer has the capacity to draft the proper documents to be filed with the court, and that the lawyer knows how to handle that situation, and that they know how to go and talk to a jury and get your case in front of a jury for a jury trial and getting a verdict at the end of that trial. That's one of the key factors in this law firm, the Paul Kruger law firm, that I think sets us apart. And we're not the only one. There are other firms that try cases, that try a number of cases, but there are many, many firms where trial lawyers will go years and years and years, even though they call themselves trial lawyers, without actually going in front of a jury trial. And when we were speaking just briefly before the recording, and I let you know this will be my first year as a lawyer, and this is due to COVID, that I will go a year without a jury trial. And that's it almost feels weird to me because one way or another, usually one or two of my cases, sometimes three, will end up in front of a jury trial, getting a verdict at the end of that course. So I think that's important. I think that's a great question to ask. When was the last time that you set foot in a courtroom? When did you try your last jury trial? And you may be shocked by the answer you get. If they say it's been years and you don't want to go to a trial, those are standard blanket answers from a lot of lawyers. Oh, you don't want to go to trial. Well, that may be the case, but it's important that that lawyer knows how to handle that if you end up in that situation. So that's why I like that question being asked. And I think that's, gives a lot of insight into the lawyer you're speaking to and their capabilities as a trial lawyer.
Yeah, great. I think that's interesting what you mentioned about how the insurance companies they gather data on everybody, and so they
not just their insurance. They're keeping track of your data and the data on the lawyers that handle personal injury cases, and they know how willing you're you're speaking to is willing to fight for your rights to resolution of your claim. So they know that, and they know that when they're speaking to them, that way they can assess what they believe the value of your claim is. And a lot of times they'll change the value depending on who your personal injury attorney is.
Yeah, yeah, really good information to know. Well, great, Wade. If someone wants to get a hold of you, if they have some more questions for you, or if they do have an injury or anything like that, how can they reach out to you?
Yeah, we have a website, Paul Kruger Law Firm. You can Google that, Paul Kruger Law Firm, pc.com. We'll get you to our website. Our contact information's there. Phone number is 503 222 0226. Again, 503 222 0226. You can ask for me. I'm Wade Bowyer. I'm one of 4 trial lawyers in the firm. We're all very good at what we do, any one of us. In this firm can handle pretty much any personal injury claim that you might have, and we're very good at doing that and helping out individuals who are hurt in car accidents.
Absolutely. Great, Wade. Well, thanks so much. I'm going to go ahead and we'll stop the recording now.